I don't consider myself to be a very brave person. There have been multiple times where I've screamed as if I'm being murdered at the sight of a slightly larger than average spider. I'm far from the horror movie protagonist who takes charge and walks confidently into an abandoned building, and while that makes me easy to make fun of at haunted houses, I think it's worth it for the aspect of self-preservation. Don't get me wrong, I love the horror genre and have a particular interest in the paranormal, but I usually need to consume that content in bright daylight to not get overwhelmed with paranoia afterwards. If I watch something even vaguely scary at night, or worse, alone at night, I'll be kept awake by the paralyzing fear of anything in my house that makes noise. I have a pretty active imagination, so my brain sometimes fills in the blank canvas of silence or darkness in with some pretty terrifying stuff. I think some of my more irrational fears come from these kinds of impulsive thoughts, but with how ridiculous some of them are, who knows? One of my most prominent fears is windows that don't have any way to cover them. I know how weird this sounds, but it's really only a problem at night because when I look out of a window and can see nothing but a deep, pitch black, all I can think of is someone, or something, standing out there and staring back at me. I've had this fear since I was a kid, and you'd think I'd be over it by now because I grew up in plenty of houses without blinds or curtains in front of certain windows, but nope. I can usually handle it pretty well in houses that I'm familiar with, but it can get really bad in places that I'm not used to. I learned this the hard way when I stayed in an Airbnb that had this one small window that faced directly into a heavily wooded area. I immediately had a horrible feeling when looking at it and ended up getting so anxious that I could barely function. The friend that I was staying with managed to cover most of it with a blanket to ease some of my worries, but man is it embarrassing to explain that the reason I'm shaking in fear is because of a window. The rest of my irrational fears are way less severe and don't cause much anxiety or changes in behavior. Like my fear of lightning. I won't cower underneath blankets during a storm, but I do worry about my house getting struck and lit on fire. My fear of heights will stop me from getting on giant Ferris wheels, but I can appreciate the views of high areas as long as I can stand at least 10 feet from the edge. And my fear of bugs crawling into my ears when I sleep just means that I cover almost my entire head with blankets anytime I'm in bed. But speaking of sleeping, one of my weird anxieties is tied to whether or not people are able to see me sleeping. I don't just mean creepers standing over my bed in the dead of night, though that also terrifies me. My brain just doesn't like the thought of anyone looking at me while I'm asleep. I've shared a room almost my entire life, so I'm not too sure where this anxiety came from, but I make it a point to either cover my face and ears in case the bugs show up, or face the wall when I go to bed. I don't know why I feel better putting my back to an open space where I'd be unable to easily defend myself if a murderer broke into my room, but my brain doesn't budge on this one. I feel like these fears are pretty common though, so I think it's time to crank up the stupidity. So let's look into what else makes me anxious for no good reason. Open doors. Hate 'em. Close it. Don't perceive me. People watching me do something. I have a huge amount of performance anxiety, and if I mess up, I want to be able to fix it before anyone finds out, but I can't do that if someone is staring over my shoulder. Go away. Poisonous creatures popping out from inside of something and killing me. Any sort of object could be an inch off the ground, but for whatever reason, I always imagine some sort of snake or scorpion or spider jumping out from any hole or crack and killing me instantly. Leaving a store without buying anything. This one enables my irresponsible spending so much, and I hate it, but for whatever reason, I just can't bring myself to walk out of a store without paying for something. There was one time when I went to Best Buy to buy a microphone, and they didn't have it, so instead of just going to another Best Buy, I bought a whole computer monitor, and then went to another Best Buy to get the microphone. Come on. Every time I floss my teeth, I get scared that somehow the floss will pop a tooth out if I go around it like you're supposed to, so I just kinda go halfway because something is better than nothing. Right? There's a lot more fears that keep my brain in a constant anxiety chokehold, but they're all pretty common or not content-worthy, so there's all my weird and stupid ones. I'm not really sure if there's a way to fix these fears, but they don't really affect me any more than making me mildly uncomfortable most of the time, so I'm not too worried about it. Wow, okay, so here's my first end card. I didn't make one in my last video because I was lazy, and also most people put fan art on them, and obviously I don't have fan art yet. But I made one for this video despite not having fan art because I have things to say. First, thank you so much for the support so far. It's super scary to jump into making my own content after being known for a specific kind of fan art for so long, and I'm so grateful for those of you who've been willing to give me a chance. I eventually want to experiment a bit with content, so if you guys have any suggestions, then feel free to leave a comment. And second, do you guys have any weird, irrational fears or anxieties? I probably have more than what I listed, but that was all I could think of, so I'd love to know that I'm not the only one with unconventional fears. Anyway, thanks so much for watching. I'll see you guys in the next video.